The Empire had ruled the stars for more than 1,000 years. They had conquered 17 star systems and destroyed dozens of species who dared to resist them. Their warships were massive beasts of metal and crystal that could burn entire continents in hours. Their soldiers stood 9 feet tall with 4 powerful arms and skin harder than steel. No enemy had ever defeated them. No species had ever refused their demands and survived. Admiral and commanded the invasion fleet from his flagship called the Eternal Dominion. He was old by standards and had led more than 40 successful conquests in his long career. When his sensors detected a small blue planet at the edge of an unremarkable galaxy, he felt nothing but boredom. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. The creatures living there called themselves humans, and studied the information his scouts had gathered. The humans were soft and weak. They had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. They could not survive in extreme temperatures. They needed to eat and sleep regularly. Their bodies broke easily and healed slowly. They had only recently discovered how to travel beyond their own planet. Their weapons were primitive compared to technology. The admiral almost laughed. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. He estimated the war would last perhaps 6 days. The humans would see the power of the fleet and surrender immediately. If they did not surrender, they would die. Either outcome was acceptable. The invasion fleet entered the solar system on a cold morning in January. There were 50 warships in total, each one capable of destroying a city with a single shot. The humans detected them almost immediately. Their primitive space stations sent panicked messages back to Earth. Their tiny defense vessels scrambled to form a pathetic line between the fleet and their planet. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the United Earth Defense Vessel Resilience when the aliens arrived. He was 53 years old with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had served in the military for 30 years and had seen combat on 3 continents. But he had never seen anything like the ships that now filled his. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. They moved like predators circling weak prey. His crew watched in silence. Navigation Officer Lisa Morgan gripped her console so hard her knuckles turned white. Tactical Officer Park ran calculations on his screen, but his hands were shaking. Communications Specialist Amy recorded everything that happened, because she believed someone should remember this moment even if none of them survived. The alien ship stopped just beyond the moon. Then they broadcast a message in every human language at the same time. The voice was cold and mechanical. Creatures of Earth, you have been chosen for conquest by the Empire. You will surrender all weapons. You will surrender all technology. You will surrender your planet and your lives to serve the Empire. If you obey, some of you will be allowed to live as slaves. If you resist, you will be destroyed completely. You have 1 hour to respond. Daniel Hayes felt something strange in his chest. It was not fear exactly. It was more like anger mixed with sadness. He thought about his daughter who lived in Seattle. He thought about his wife who had died 5 years ago. He thought about all the humans on the planet below who were probably terrified right now. He opened a channel to Earth Command. The President of the United Nations appeared on screen. She was a small woman named Cole with tired eyes and a firm voice. Commander Hayes, what is your assessment? Daniel looked at the alien fleet on his sensors. He looked at his own small ship and the handful of other vessels that made up humanity's entire space defense force. He knew the math. He knew they could not win a direct fight. Madam President, they are stronger than us. They have better weapons and more ships. If we fight them directly, we will lose. Cole nodded slowly. And if we surrender? They said we would become slaves, but I do not trust them to keep even that promise. Species that conquer others rarely show mercy. The president was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that would change human history. What do you recommend, Commander? Daniel Hayes took a deep breath. He looked at his crew. Lisa Morgan met his eyes and nodded. Park stopped shaking and stood. Amy kept recording, but she was smiling now, a sad and fierce smile. "I recommend we fight," Daniel said. "Not because we can win, but because surrender is not who we are. Humans have faced extinction before, ice ages, plagues, wars. We survived all of them because we refused to give up. If we surrender now without fighting, we betray everyone who came before us. We betray everyone who will come after us." Cole closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there were tears on her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "Then we fight. May God help us all." Daniel Hayes turned to Amy. "Open a channel to the alien fleet." Amy pressed the buttons with trembling fingers. "Channel open, Commander." Daniel stood straight and spoke clearly so there would be no misunderstanding. "Attention fleet. This is Commander Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. We have received your demands. We have considered them carefully, and we have decided to give you our answer." He paused for just a moment. "We do not surrender. Not today. Not ever. If you want our planet, you will have to take it from us, and we will make you pay for every inch in blood." On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral and heard the message and felt genuine surprise. No species had ever refused demands before. These humans were either very brave or very stupid, probably both. He gave the order to begin the attack. The first plasma beam struck Earth 12 minutes later. San Francisco burned. Tokyo burned. London burned. Millions of humans died in the first 6 hours of the war. But the humans did not surrender. Instead, they fought back. Ground-based weapons fired at the alien ships. Nuclear missiles launched from hidden silos. Soldiers grabbed their guns and prepared to face enemies they could not possibly defeat. Admiral and watched the chaos below and felt his first moment of doubt. These creatures were dying by the millions. Their cities were turning to ash. They had no hope of victory. And yet they kept fighting. He did not understand. He could not understand. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy who would rather die than kneel. They were about to remember. The first week of the invasion was the worst time in human history. The ships rained fire from the sky without mercy. Major cities became craters. Governments collapsed. Communication networks fell silent. Many people believed humanity would be extinct within a month. But in the ruins and the shadows, something unexpected was happening. Humans were learning how to fight back. Sergeant Cole led a small squad of 12 soldiers through the destroyed streets of Denver. The city was unrecognizable now. Buildings that had stood for 100 years were piles of broken concrete. Cars lay scattered like toys thrown by an angry child. The smell of smoke and death hung in the air like a thick blanket. Was 31 years old with short brown hair and sharp green eyes. He had grown up hunting deer in the mountains of Colorado with his father. He knew how to move without making sound. He knew how to wait for hours without moving a single muscle. He knew how to read tracks and predict where his prey would go next. Now he was hunting something far more dangerous than deer. The soldiers were terrifying to look at. They stood almost 9 feet tall with 4 arms and heads that looked like a mixture of insect and reptile. Their armor was a strange crystal material that could stop most human bullets. Their weapons fired bolts of superheated plasma that could burn through a tank. But had noticed something during the past week of fighting. The aliens were not very smart in combat. They walked in straight lines. They never looked up. They bunched together in groups that made them easy targets. They seemed confused when humans did not stand and fight in the open like proper soldiers. Had realized that they had never fought a guerrilla war before. They did not understand ambushes. They did not expect enemies to hide in sewers and attack from behind. They did not know how to deal with traps and tricks. He used this knowledge to keep his squad alive. "Contact ahead," whispered Private Maria Santos. She was the youngest member of the squad at only 19 years old, but she had the sharpest eyes. Raised his hand to signal the squad to stop. He crawled forward on his belly until he could see around a pile of rubble. Three soldiers were walking down the street toward a group of human refugees who were hiding in a collapsed building. The aliens had not spotted the humans yet, but they would in a few minutes. Considered his options. His squad had limited ammunition. Fighting three soldiers in the open was suicide, but if he did nothing, those refugees would die. He made his decision quickly. Maria, take position on that roof. Aim for the middle one. Pete, you and Sam set up the wire across the street. Everyone else find cover and wait for my signal. The squad moved like ghosts. Maria climbed to her position in 30 seconds. Pete and Sam stretched a thin wire across the street at ankle height. The others found hiding spots in the rubble. Picked up a chunk of concrete and threw it to the left of the patrol. The sound made them turn. As they moved toward the noise, the lead soldier hit the wire and stumbled. He did not fall, but he lost his balance for just a moment. That moment was enough. Maria fired first. Her bullet found the gap in the middle soldier's armor where the helmet met the neck. The alien dropped without a sound. The other two raised their weapons, but they did not know where the shot came from. And his squad opened fire from 3 different directions. The soldiers spun in confusion, trying to find targets that kept moving. One of them took a bullet in the eye. The last one managed to fire a plasma bolt that killed Private Sam before put 3 rounds through its chest. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Checked on Sam, but there was nothing to be done. The plasma had burned through his entire torso. He was dead before he hit the ground. Move the refugees, ordered. We need to be gone before more of them show up. That night, as his squad rested in an abandoned mine shaft, wrote in his journal. He had killed his first soldier 3 days ago. Since then, his squad had killed 16 more. They had lost 4 of their own. The math was impossible by any standard military calculation. Humans were supposed to die by the dozens for every alien they killed. But no one had told the aliens that humans did not follow the rules. Miles away, in a bunker buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Christina Wells was making discoveries that would change the war. Christina was Before the invasion, she had spent her career imagining what alien life might look like. She had written papers about possible alien biologies and alien societies. She had dreamed of first contact as a peaceful exchange of knowledge between species. Reality had been much than her dreams. Now she studied captured equipment with desperate intensity. She had 3 dead alien soldiers in her laboratory. She had pieces of their weapons and armor. She had fragments of their communications devices. What she found surprised her. They were a hive species, not like ants or bees with a single queen controlling everything. It was more subtle than that. Every soldier was connected to a command structure that told them what to do. They received orders constantly through implants in their brains. They did not think for themselves because they did not need to. Someone higher in the chain of command made all the decisions. This was their great strength. 1,000,000 soldiers could act as one with perfect coordination, but it was also their great weakness. When the communication was disrupted, the soldiers became confused and hesitant. They would wait for orders instead of acting on their own. Humans were completely different. Every human soldier could think independently. A squad that lost contact with headquarters would keep fighting on their own. They would make their own decisions. They would adapt to new situations without needing permission. Christina wrote her report and sent it to whoever was still listening in the military command. She did not know if anyone would receive it, but if they did, it could make a real difference. 200 miles away, Admiral N sat in his command chamber and stared at reports he did not want to believe. The invasion should have been over by now. Earth should be. The remaining humans should be gathered in camps waiting to be shipped off as slaves. Instead, his forces were bleeding. They were losing soldiers every day in dozens of small fights across the planet. Supply convoys were being ambushed. Outposts were being overrun in the night. His communications officers reported that some units had simply vanished without a trace. This was not how war was supposed to work. And summoned his senior commanders for a meeting. They looked as confused as he felt. "These creatures do not know how to surrender," one of them said. "They keep fighting even when victory is impossible. It makes no sense." Another commander spoke with anger in his voice. "They are animals. They do not understand that they have already lost. We simply need to kill more of them until the survivors learn their place." And was not so sure. He had conquered many species in his career. Some had fought briefly before surrendering. Some had tried to negotiate. Some had fled their planets entirely. None of them had fought like this. He gave the order to send more troops to the surface. The humans would learn eventually. They had no choice. But deep in his ancient heart, Admiral felt the first cold touch of doubt. 6 months passed since the first day of the invasion. The now controlled roughly 60% of Earth's surface. Their flags flew over the ruins of capitals, and their soldiers patrolled the streets of conquered cities. By their original calculations, the war should have ended in less than a week. No one talked about those calculations anymore. Captain Martinez commanded the human resistance in South America. He was a compact man with dark hair and a scar across his left cheek from a plasma burn he had received in the early days of the war. He had started with a company of 200 soldiers hiding in the Amazon rainforest. Now, he commanded an army of 12,000 fighters spread across the continent. His soldiers were a mixture of professional military and ordinary civilians who had picked up weapons to defend their homes. There were former police officers and school teachers. There were farmers and factory workers. There were teenagers who had lied about their age to join the fight. They came from every country and spoke a dozen different languages, but they all shared one thing in common. They refused to accept defeat. Had learned much about the aliens in 6 months of constant fighting. He knew their strengths. Their weapons were devastating at long range. Their armor could stop most small arms fire. Their physical strength was terrifying in close combat. A single soldier could tear a human apart with his bare hands. But he had also learned their weaknesses. They were predictable. They followed orders blindly. They struggled to adapt when their plans fell apart. And most importantly, they depended on constant communication with their commanders. Dr. Christina Wells had provided the key to exploiting that weakness. Her research on the command structure had been shared with every resistance group on the planet. Now human forces specifically targeted communication relays and command vehicles. They killed officers first. They jammed frequencies. They spread chaos and confusion wherever they could. The results were remarkable. In Brazil, a battalion of 500 soldiers was surrounded and destroyed by a human force half their size. The humans had killed the battalion commander in the first minutes of the fight. Without orders, the alien soldiers had frozen in place while human fighters flanked them and cut them down. In Argentina, resistance fighters had captured an entire supply depot by broadcasting fake orders that sent the guards to the wrong location. The supplies included weapons, medical equipment, and most importantly, working vehicles that humans could reverse engineer. In Colombia, Martinez himself had led a raid on a regional headquarters. His soldiers had killed 200 aliens and rescued 300 human prisoners who were scheduled for transport to the slave ships in orbit. They were learning that Earth was not like other planets they had conquered. Commander Daniel Hayes had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the invasion began. He had become the de facto leader of coordinated human resistance after most of the world's governments collapsed in the first month. He operated from a secret base that moved every few weeks to avoid detection. His staff worked around the clock to gather intelligence, coordinate attacks, and keep hope alive. Daniel was talking to Captain Martinez via a secure channel when he received news that changed everything. "Commander," said Lisa Morgan, who had survived the first battle and now served as his chief intelligence officer. "We have confirmation. Dr. Wells has cracked the encryption." Daniel felt his heart skip a beat. Completely. Completely. We can read their communications in real time. We know their patrol routes, their supply schedules, their troop movements. We know everything. For the first time in 6 months, Daniel Hayes smiled. The advantage shifted almost overnight. Human forces stopped fighting blind. They knew exactly where the aliens would be and when they would arrive. They set ambushes that killed hundreds of soldiers. They attacked supply convoys at their most vulnerable moments. They rescued prisoners hours before executions were scheduled. Admiral and watched his invasion falling apart and could not understand why. His losses had become unsustainable. He was losing 50 soldiers for every one he had lost in the first week. His supply lines were collapsing. His officers were dying faster than he could replace them. Morale among his troops was crumbling as stories spread of the human demons who struck from the shadows and vanished like ghosts. He sent urgent messages to the Empress requesting reinforcements. The replies were not encouraging. The empire was vast and its resources were stretched thin. Other conquests demanded attention. The Empress was growing impatient with reports of failure from a planet that should have been easy, and made a decision that had never been made in the history of warfare. He ordered a tactical retreat. His forces abandoned their positions across South America, Africa, and most of Asia. They consolidated in North America and Europe, where their control was strongest. They built fortifications and established defensive perimeters. The humans watched the retreat with amazement and suspicion. Many believed it was a trick. Others celebrated the liberation of their homelands. But among them, including Daniel Hayes and Martinez, knew that the war was far from over. "They are regrouping," Daniel said during a council of resistance leaders from around the world. "They have realized they cannot hold the entire planet with their current forces. They will defend what they have and wait for reinforcements." "Then we must not give them time to wait," said a woman named Long who led the resistance in Australia. "We must keep attacking. We must make them bleed until they have nothing left." Daniel nodded, agreed, but we need something more than guerrilla tactics. We need to take the fight to space. As long as they control orbit, they can burn our cities whenever they choose. This was the great problem. Humans had some spacecraft, but nothing that could challenge the fleet in direct combat. They needed ships, real warships that could hurt the aliens. Christina Wells had been working on this problem for months. She had teams of engineers studying every piece of technology they could capture. They were learning how the alien weapons worked. They were figuring out how to build human versions. It would take time, but for the first time since the invasion began, humans had something they had almost forgotten. They had hope. In the ruins of cities around the world, human engineers began building weapons that would change history. In hidden bases and underground factories, they assembled ships from salvaged parts and desperate innovation. They worked without rest because they knew the future of their species depended on what they created. They had come to Earth expecting easy prey. They had found something very different. They had found an enemy that learned from every defeat and grew stronger with every battle. They had found a species that turned tragedy into fuel for resistance. They had found humans. And humans were just getting started. The war entered its second year. They still held orbital superiority, but their grip on Earth had weakened to the point of breaking. Every day brought new reports of human attacks, captured equipment, and dead alien soldiers. The invasion force that had arrived with 50 warships now operated with 32. The rest had been destroyed by nuclear weapons, captured alien technology, or the first generation of human-built spacecraft. Lieutenant Stone piloted one of these new ships. She called it the Defiance because that was exactly what it represented. The ship was ugly by any standard. It was a converted cargo hauler that had been fitted with salvaged weapons and armor plates welded onto the hull by human hands. It looked like something a child might build from spare parts. But it flew, and it fought, and it had killed more aliens than anyone had thought possible. Was 24 years old with short red hair and freckles across her nose. Before the invasion, she had been studying to become a teacher. She had wanted to work with children and make a difference in their lives. The war had changed those plans forever. She had lost her parents in the first bombardment. She had lost her younger brother in a raid 6 months later. She had lost her home, her future, and almost her sanity. But somewhere in all that loss, she had found something else. She had found a reason to keep living. That reason was revenge. Led a squadron of 12 similar ships. They operated in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, using the rocks as cover for hit-and-run attacks on supply lines. Their tactics were simple but effective. Wait for a convoy, strike fast, kill what you can, disappear before reinforcements arrive. They called her the ghost of the belt. They had put a price on her head equivalent to the value of an entire colony ship. 3 times they had sent special hunter units to track her down. 3 times she had turned the hunters into prey. Commander Daniel Hayes watched his latest battle footage with something that might have been pride. The young woman had destroyed 2 destroyers and captured a transport full of weapons that would arm 10,000 human soldiers. "She is remarkable," said Lisa Morgan, who stood beside him in the command center of their current base. "She is angry," Daniel replied, "but she uses that anger instead of letting it control her. That is rare. We need more like her." "We have more like her. Every human who has survived this war carries the same fire. The aliens made a terrible mistake when they attacked us. They thought destroying our cities would break our spirit. Instead, it forged us into something harder than we have ever been." The second year of the war was different from the first. In the first year, humans had fought to survive. In the second year, they began to fight to win. Christina Wells had created weapons that they had never seen before. She had combined human creativity with alien technology to produce surprises that horrified the enemy. Rifles that could punch through their crystal armor. Grenades that disrupted their communication implants. Viruses that spread through their computer systems and corrupted their data. The human fleet grew from a handful of converted cargo ships to nearly 200 vessels of various sizes. They were still outnumbered and by the fleet, but they were learning to fight in ways the aliens could not predict. Admiral and received a message from the Empress that filled him with dread. "You have had 2 years to complete this conquest. You have failed repeatedly. I am sending you one final reinforcement fleet. If you do not achieve victory within 6 months, you will be replaced. I trust you understand what replacement means." And understood perfectly. Failure meant death. The Empress did not tolerate commanders who could not deliver results. He gathered his remaining officers for a desperate council of war. The reinforcement fleet would arrive in 3 months. Until then, he needed to find a way to turn the tide. "We need to eliminate their leadership," said one of his advisors. "The humans coordinate their attacks too well. Someone is organizing them. If we find and kill that someone, their resistance will collapse." And considered this. Intelligence reports suggested that the human command structure was centered somewhere in the former nation of Canada. They had not been able to locate the exact position, but they had intercepted enough communications to know it existed. "How do we find them?" he asked. "We offer peace talks," the advisor replied. "The humans have been requesting negotiations for months. We agree to meet. We let them think we are sincere. Then we strike during the meeting and eliminate everyone who matters." It was a dishonorable tactic. They had always prided themselves on straightforward combat, but had learned that honor was a luxury he could no longer afford. He sent the message offering peace talks. The humans agreed cautiously. The meeting was set for a neutral location in what had once been Greenland. Daniel Hayes received the invitation with deep suspicion. He did not trust the aliens. He did not believe they wanted peace, but he also knew that refusing to negotiate would make humans look like the aggressors. The other species of the galaxy were watching this war. Their opinion mattered for the future. "It is a trap," said Long flatly during the council discussion. "Obviously," Daniel agreed. "The question is how we turn their trap into ours." They spent 2 weeks planning. When Daniel Hayes and a delegation of human leaders flew to Greenland for the peace conference, they knew exactly what was going to happen. The assault teams attacked during the opening ceremony. They burst through the walls with plasma weapons blazing. They expected to find human leaders cowering in fear. Instead, they found holographic projections and empty chairs. The real human delegation was watching from a bunker 50 miles away. The explosives buried beneath the conference building detonated 3 seconds after the teams entered. The blast was visible from orbit, and lost his entire senior staff in that explosion. His strategic coordinators, his intelligence officers, his most experienced commanders, gone in an instant. He survived only because he had chosen to watch from his flagship instead of attending in person. For the first time in his long life, Admiral felt genuine fear. Not fear of the Empress or fear of death, fear of the humans. These creatures had anticipated his treachery and punished him for it. They had turned his own tactics against him with brutal efficiency. They had proven that they could think ahead, plan carefully, and strike without mercy. He stared at the burning crater that had been his command structure and whispered words he had never spoken before. "What have we awakened?" The answer would come soon enough. The war lasted 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. It ended not with a great battle or a dramatic surrender. It ended with a simple truth that the Empire could no longer deny. They could not win. Admiral and stood alone in his command chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion. The reinforcement fleet had arrived 6 months ago with fresh soldiers and new ships. It had made no difference. The humans had adapted to every tactic. They had countered every strategy. They had grown stronger while his forces grew weaker. The numbers told the story. The invasion had begun with 50 warships. Now only 19 remained operational. They had landed 500,000 soldiers on Earth. Fewer than 80,000 were still alive. The reinforcement fleet had added another 30 ships and 200,000 troops. Half of those ships were destroyed. 2/3 of those soldiers were dead. The Empress had sent him a final message 3 days ago. She was cutting her losses. No more reinforcements would come. The war was draining resources needed elsewhere. If he could not achieve victory with his current forces, he should negotiate the best withdrawal terms possible. It was the closest the Empress had ever come to admitting defeat. And opened a communication channel to Earth. Commander Daniel Hayes appeared on the screen. The human looked older than he had 3 years ago. His hair was completely gray now. Lines of exhaustion marked his face, but his eyes were still sharp and his voice was still steady. "Admiral N, I assume you are not calling to threaten us again." "No," N said quietly. "I am calling to request a ceasefire." Daniel Hayes showed no emotion. He had learned to hide his feelings during 3 years of war. "A ceasefire, not a surrender." "The Empire does not surrender." Even now, and could not bring himself to say that word. "Then what exactly are you proposing?" And took a deep breath. What he was about to say would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. It was still almost impossible to speak. "We will withdraw from your solar system. We will release all human prisoners in our custody. We will provide coordinates of all surviving prisoners who have been transported off-world. In exchange, you will allow our remaining forces to leave peacefully." Daniel considered the offer carefully. He consulted with his advisors off-screen. After several minutes, he spoke again. "You will also provide us with star charts showing territory. You will agree to a formal border that your ships will not cross, and you will publicly acknowledge that Earth is not part of your empire and never will be. These additional demands were humiliating. They would broadcast to the entire galaxy that the mighty had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive, and knew his career was over. He would probably be executed when he returned home regardless of what he agreed to. But the alternative was worse. If he refused, the humans would continue fighting. They would destroy his remaining ships one by one. They would hunt down his soldiers until none remained, and they would do it with the same relentless determination they had shown for 3 years. Agreed and said. The ceasefire went into effect at midnight Earth time. Human soldiers around the world stopped fighting and looked up at the sky with exhaustion and disbelief. Many of them had been born during the war. They had never known a world without alien invaders. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resilience and watched the fleet prepare to leave. It was the same ship where he had refused to surrender 3 years ago. Most of the original crew was gone now. Lisa Morgan had died in a raid 2 years ago. Park had lost both legs and worked in intelligence from a wheelchair. Amy still recorded everything because someone needed to remember. The alien ships turned away from Earth one by one. Their engines flared blue and they accelerated toward the edge of the solar system. And's flagship was the last to leave. Before he departed, the Admiral sent one final message. It was not addressed to Daniel Hayes or the human military. It was addressed to his own people, to the Empire, to anyone who might be listening. I have commanded 43 successful conquests in my career. I have destroyed civilizations and enslaved billions of beings. I thought I understood war. I thought I understood strength. I was wrong. The humans taught me something that I will carry to my grave. There are different kinds of strength. They are strong because we have better weapons and bigger armies. We conquer because we are powerful, but the humans are strong in a different way. They are strong because they will not stop fighting. They adapt to anything we do. They find weaknesses we did not know we had. They turn our own weapons against us. And they keep coming, generation after generation, until their enemies cannot fight anymore. We lost this war not because the humans were more powerful than us. We lost because they refused to accept defeat. We lost because every human who died was replaced by 2 more who were angrier and more determined. We lost because these creatures do not know how to surrender. My advice to the Empire is simple. Do not return to Earth. Do not provoke these humans. Do not give them a reason to leave their planet and come looking for us. Because if they do, if they ever decide to conquer instead of defend, no force in the galaxy will be able to stop them. After encountering humans, winning against them is unthinkable, not because they are stronger, not because they are smarter, but because they will never, ever give up. The message ended. The Eternal Dominion jumped to hyperspace and vanished from human sensors. On Earth, the sun rose over a world that had been forever changed. Cities lay in ruins. Billions of people were dead. The scars of war would take generations to heal. But humanity had survived. Daniel Hayes stood at a window and watched the sunrise. He was 64 years old now and felt every year in his bones. He had seen too much death. He had made too many hard choices. He wanted nothing more than to rest. But there was work to do, cities to rebuild, people to care for, and a future to create for the children who had been born during the war. He turned to Amy, who still stood beside him after all these years. "Make sure you record this," he said quietly. "Record what, Commander?" "The first sunrise of peace, the beginning of whatever comes next." He paused and looked at the golden light spreading across the wounded planet, and the proof that we do not surrender, not today, not ever. Somewhere in the depths of space, the fleet carried a warning back to their empire. A warning about a small blue planet that should have been easy to conquer. A warning about creatures who looked weak but fought like demons. A warning about the species called humanity. The galaxy would remember that warning for a very long time. And humans would never let them forget.